I'd like to welcome you, but I'm a little preoccupied navigating these waves. It seems Lake Ontario is ticked off this morning. Yesterday, when we were hanging out at St. Catharines Marina, it was serene. Calm waters, clear sky, and all-around beauty of a day. We even went out for a sunset cruise, lightheartedly looking forward to our big boating adventure of a Welland Canal transit. Yeah, well, not today. At least we didn't have far to go in the open lake. St. Catharines Marina is located right on the eastern arm of the mouth of the Welland. And boy, did those breakwaters work. Instant relief as soon as we were in the canal. Now that things have calmed down a little bit, now that we're in the Welland Canal, I can officially welcome you to this episode of PowerBoat Television. And this is something good to know. The canal is quite sheltered. Those breakwalls do their job. Now we're just heading up to the pleasure craft dock to check in, and we'll take it from there. We got 8 locks to go, about 43 kilometers of boating, and some nerdy history on the way. First thing anyone has to do is check in with Master Control using the direct line at the pleasure craft dock. Here you'll get your instructions, and you can pay for the transit if you haven't done so online already. Okay, we'll sit tight. Thanks, man. Bye. Mechanical work on one of the locks meant an hour's wait, I was told. The crew, my mom, stepdad, sister, and brother-in-law, passed the time with cards, while my wife Jay and I reviewed the Pleasurecraft guide that you should print off the Seaways website. Be prepared to wait it out. You can't beg your way off the dock and into the lock, and once you start, you have to continue all the way through. There's no resupplying or refueling on the way, so have your tanks topped up and your fridge and cooler full of snacks and drinks. Seaway Welland, this is worth the wait, over.
The wait, Seaway Welland, in the next 10 minutes you're going to get a green light at Lock 1, over.
Green light at Lock 1 in the next 10 minutes. Copy that, over. Using the info in our Pleasurecraft guide, we were able to prep our fenders as we cast off the dock and towards Lock 1. And they sure are accurate. 9 minutes later, bingo. The entire canal is 43 kilometers long from Lake Ontario to Lake Erie with 8 locks. But since we're climbing up the steep Niagara escarpment, the first 7 are all within 11 kilometers of each other. The whole thing being massively important to commercial trade.
The St. Lawrence Seaway, and the Welland Canal in particular, is a vital link between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. There's a lot of commercial activity. The cargo that goes on the canal basically supports 227,000 jobs and up to $35 billion in economic activity per year. So it is an essential link to the North American continent.
It's also essential for anyone wanting to get their personal boat between Lakes Ontario and Erie without using a trailer, but it's no simple cruise. On the way up the canal, you enter the locks at the lowest point and have to grab the lines the lock staff lower to you. Lock 1 is definitely a learning curve, but so far so good. It takes about 12 minutes to fill, and that means churning water and turbulence. Shortly after the water is at the right height, everything swings into action, and in no time at all, we get the white light, which means we can leave. So we cast off, and thanks to the friendly and helpful lock staff, know exactly where to go in Lock 2. On our way out, the clouds started to break up and the heat kicked up, a nice change from how this whole adventure began. Cruising along the calm waters between the locks and alongside a running trail is a perfect time to fill in the paperwork, a one-sheet form with all the basic info of your boat, hull number, owner, contact info, and such. When you get the green light on the final limit of approach sign, you're clear to enter. So, here goes Lock 2. Later in the show, we get to the famous and massive flight locks and come face to face with one of the big boys.
Okay, hang on like that. Going up. Going up. Thank you.
Welcome back to our Welland Canal Transit. This commercial wonder is almost 200 years old, all to avoid this little boating obstacle.
Mainly it was maximizing the use of existing rivers, but as it got busier and busier with traffic, bigger boats wanted to come in but couldn't negotiate either the restrictions of the first canal, so second canal was built, third canal was built, and today we're standing at the fourth Welland Canal, which was built in the 1920s to 1930s.
The current one is essentially a straight line from Lake Ontario to Lake Erie to allow the big ships to navigate it more easily, but there are 300 to 400 recreational boats that go through each year as well. If you're planning a trip between the lakes or just want to take on the Welland for the adventure, be aware there are restrictions.
We have a minimum requirement of 20 feet length and 2,000 pounds. You need 3 people on board, 1 to operate the craft and 2 people to tend the lines. And everybody has to wear a personal flotation device.
That 3-person crew is the minimum. Sure, you can do it with 3, but the more people you have, the easier it is. We had 2 at the bow and 2 at the stern, 1 holding a line and 1 keeping us off the wall with a pole. A good tip is to make sure you run the lines to the far side of your boat for better leverage. Just make sure you can easily slide the lines along the cleat. Don't tie off. The average rise of each lock is just under 50 feet, which means huge doors. But when you get to locks 4, 5, and 6, they're twice as big. Here, there is no channel between locks. Instead, it's back to back to back, so the exit doors for lock 4 are also the entry doors to lock 5. Luckily, these aren't at the start of the journey. Even after getting through 3 locks, these are still intimidating. It's the same system though, and the rise itself is no bigger, it's just that the doors look like the gates of Jurassic Park when you're heading upbound and enter at the lowest point. You have to drive right up to these behemoths, and then try to keep it in position as you go up. At the top of these 3 that lift you onto the Niagara Escarpment, we ran into our only traffic of the day, a ship coming out of Lock 7, which meant we had time for a lunch break as we sat atop Lock 6. The flight locks are twinned for dedicated upbound and downbound traffic, as waiting for 3 locks would be a nightmare. Every other lock is single, so you might have to wait for someone to come or go. But it's not too bad, even though sometimes these big guys can go very slowly and just inch out of the locks. The final big lift in Lock 7 was technically as straightforward as the rest, but the sounds were downright spooky. Once that lift is done, it's smooth sailing for a few hours. You have to wait for a lift bridge, same system as the locks, wait for the green light, but it's mostly just a straight shot from here. Largely along a man-made channel, which admittedly is the boring section, but it can be a nice break from the hours of work you just did. The final lock is the same length and width as the rest, but otherwise looks a lot smaller, because the rise is only a few feet to regulate the level of the canal before entering Lake Erie. Here you don't even tie up in a recreational boat, you just kind of idle in the center. The final obstacle before considering your transit complete is a final lift bridge. It takes a few minutes to lift, we've sped it up here, but they start lifting as soon as you approach, so you don't have to wait much at all if there's no traffic. And instead of sliding right into Lake Erie, we're going to make a hard turn to starboard and call it a day. So all in all, that went pretty well for us. 7 hours, that's pretty quick actually, but it's still exhausting. And Sugarloaf Marina, right at the mouth of the Welland, is a welcome refuge. So we're going to tie up here, relax, maybe have a cocktail, but after we're tied up, and review the pictures and enjoy our break. But it went good. Good job, team. Nice. Woo. The downbound trip is the same length, but much more relaxed. Water drains out of the locks like water out of a tub, slowly and with none of the turbulence you deal with on the way up. After that upbound trip, this is a breeze. And after doing the Welland Canal twice in less than a week, you can cruise off knowing that you've completed one of the greatest and most historic boating adventures in North America.